When you're getting ready to do an ink sketch, you don't have to, you may want to be picky about the ink you use, but when you're beginning, you don't really need to. In fact, my son loves using a ballpoint pen, and he has been quite the artist for several years. So no matter what pen you use, grab a piece of scratch paper and see what it does with hatch marks or cross hatch. See what kind of marks you can make with it. See if you like it. This is called scumbling. Also do some slow start and stops. See what happens with it. Some of you have something like this in your kit. You see how it kind of makes a little end? Some of these have two ends to them, the brush marker, which works differently depending on how you draw it because it works just like a brush. But this makes very cool swoopy lines. Or you may want to try a fountain pen. You have one of those laying around. If you have a calligraphy pen, see if you like that. That actually makes pretty cool lines. You can also get, oh, this is another brush pen. You can get some artist pens that are very fine point, and you get to choose your points. So this is what we're going to figure out. What do we want to do here and which one works together? You could actually combine them. These two work really well together. You could actually even combine this with one of these. I'm not sure if I'd use the blue and the black together, so if you're using blue ink, I would probably stick with blue ink unless it really makes sense to go with a black or with a red or something like that. But I'm going to give you free rein to do whatever you need to do with that. As you're going to be drawing, I want you to think about the value that you get. So this value chart, you can see my paper is right here. And you're going to have to kind of squint your eyes to kind of see where that lies. But if you squint your eyes, this is pretty close to a 2. And I think it's easier to see on this side without those numbers. That's pretty close to a 2. Whereas that is closer to here, my goodness, and that's closer to there. That's pretty close there. This one, probably down in here. When it comes to the cross hatching, even though they're the same lines, when you go both directions, it's going to be darker. So that one, although it was here, it's closer to this. And when I scumbled, I've scumbled even more ink there, so it's closer to this. All right, so each time you add more lines, it can make it darker and darker. And then of course you can always get your completely black if you need to in one little area or something. I would use solid black sparingly. Use your texture, use your line weight, use your line direction. Don't just throw lines down indiscriminately, but really think about what you want. If I was going to draw this pen, and I pulled this out just to remind you to don't use a wet erase pen. I don't think it's going to work very well on the paper. It might smudge. Oh, on this paper it doesn't. Check it out. Might work for you. You've probably got 100 things you could use for an ink sketch. And don't get too fussy. Do several ink sketches so you can choose your best one. You can just start right in. I actually kind of like this weird one. I could use that one for an ink sketch. And I think I'll lay that right here so that I can see what it looks like. I just don't want it to tip because I want to see that. From my point of view, I can see that little gap there. Now, you don't have to start off with a line drawing. If you have some long edges, feel free to use them. But can you see how I've changed that line into an edge? It's now no longer a line, because this is a long, thin object. It'll be. Now see, I didn't like that space between there too much. Yeah, go back in and change that a bit. I see some long reflections, so I'm actually going to use long lines. Instead of hatching this way, I'm going to hatch or do lines this way to describe that. Even if it gets filled in, my pencil stroke makes a big difference. And I don't know that I necessarily want to have those words be visible, but I can kind of give an illusion of words. Now, if I hold this pen very lightly, I think I can make some really light lines. If I make those following the curve, it's kind of hard to do. It doesn't want to. I want them to be a different weight than the words that I just did. And I'm going to add that here just because I think it will fit better. Well, we can decide if that was a mistake or not. And I want to put a shadow underneath there. So I don't want my shadow to go in the same direction. It's a different surface. I need to do lines in a different direction. That's the biggest thing with ink drawing, is to figure out what you're doing with your different surfaces. So I want a shadow here. That shadow comes out there. So I'm really looking at the object to see what's happening with it. I actually, because this edge of the pen is in shadow and that one isn't, this one feels lighter now just because of all the dark lines next to it. So I'm actually going to come and darken that edge, and it really makes it feel like it goes into the shadow. So that's that pen. If I wanted to use a brush pen, and I'll do a slightly different view. And with this one I can get narrow weights and heavy weights. Whoa. If you make a mistake, don't let it stress you. Instead of doing the lines the way I did here, I'm going to try it a different direction. See if I like it better. Still feels like it needs something. If I'm going to do something that resembles words and they curve, I need to make sure that they curve just like the words do. I still, since I have lines going this way, I still am going to put lines coming this way. I'm going to do these completely flat though. Now even though that lid is black, I don't necessarily have to fill it all in black because it has reflections. I'm going to fix that. And I'm going to add a little bit more to this. Make it feel more like a black lid with reflections. I don't want those two reflections to be equal. There, that's feeling a little bit better. That's with a brush pen. So, any pen you use, just play with it and see what you're going to do. You may have a texture that you feel like you really need to scumble. Typically rough things, or was doing a teddy bear or a towel or something like that, I might scumble that texture. What pen didn't I use? Let's use this end. I might scumble that texture so that the shadow, instead of hatching, I might go like this for the shadow. So I'm doing this little fold here. I think you can see. It doesn't hit all the time, no problem. But instead of lines, I can go ahead and just, and then afterwards, if I feel like, okay, I'm going to add just a little bit of line to show that that's the edge. Great. Okay. So whatever texture you feel like works, just try it out. Now, if you really feel uncomfortable just starting like that, feel free to give yourself just a very light pencil sketch so that you have a feel for what's going to happen. And then you can, don't erase it after you're done with your ink drawing. If you don't like the pencil marks there, then you need to wait at least 24 hours before you erase, because that ink will still be wet. It takes a long time for it to dry and absorb into the paper. So you can do that before you start if you want to. Enjoy, have fun, and don't stress over it. Mistakes just get incorporated. It doesn't matter. It's okay.